All right. Well, hello everyone. This is Josh Krieger with Edge of NFT, one of the co-hosts here live at Tokyo 2049. Really honored to be here with Klaytn's global head of adoption, David Shin, who is an OG in the space. And I've been told by many I have to get a little bit of that background from you. But, you know, Klaytn, guys, we may not have all heard about it in the US, but all you hear about it in Asia. Klaytn this, Klaytn that. It's a really exciting company that has some really interesting roots. I had a pleasure of talking with Yoshi the other day and learning more about his background with Klaytn. And I want to go into more depth with folks because people really need to understand what's going on with Klaytn and why it's so significant globally to both Web 2 and Web 3. But first, let's learn a little bit more about you. How did you get into the space and to where you are now?
Thanks for having me, first of all. It's awesome to be here. I got involved in 2012. I started out as one of the first ASIC miners. And then I quickly rotated in 2013 to creating my own startup called Paywise. I was based out of Hong Kong at the time. While I was doing all that, I was an investment banker. So, being a regulated banker, I had to disclose a lot of what I was doing. And, in the early days, the bank's compliance, they didn't really know what Bitcoin mining was. So they just said yes to everything. And then, the Silk Road event happened in 2013. And they pulled me aside and I almost got fired. I remember that much. But I told them, I would rather choose doing what I'm doing. If you want to fire me, let me go. They ended up keeping me because they realized that at some stage they may want to go down the path of having a blockchain strategy. This is a large European bank. So I continued on. So I was able to set up this company called Paywise out of Hong Kong. It caught the attention of a guy named Gary Kreeman out of Silicon Valley. Gary Kreeman was the founder of Match.com.
Okay.
So he called me up and he said, I need you to come in and speak to Chris Larson, because Paywise was essentially looking at using Ripple to disrupt Swift. So today, when you think about Ripple, for those people in your audience who are watching and listening, they'll probably think, well, isn't that what they do? Don't they go after the cross-border Swift type use cases? They didn't in the early days. So I had quite an effect in changing and having them look at this use case. So just to finish off that story, I know this is getting a bit long. So I flew out to San Francisco, met Chris, spent about 3 days whiteboarding for him and his team why they should be going after Swift. Long story short, they did that. Shortly thereafter, I introduced them to a very good friend of mine because of Bitcoin named Matthew Mellon, who passed away in 2018. Matthew was, a part of the Mellon family, Carnegie Mellon, Bank of New York Mellon. He was really into Bitcoin early on because of the Winklevoss twins. And he was really interested in Bitcoin in Asia, so that's how we became good friends. But I told Matt, I said, for his profile, it would be a lot better for him to work with Chris and Ripple, so he did that. So for those of you listening or watching, you can Google the name Matthew Mellon and Ripple. You'll see sort of how much he was involved with them after that introduction. So I've got a long history. I decided in 2019 that I would just retire from banking completely and stop playing sort of this Bruce Wayne Batman thing.
Yeah, just fully out of the closet.
Just fully out of the closet. That's a great way to present it. And at that stage, I decided to go help my friend Roger Ver set up his exchange for Bitcoin.com. I told Roger one of the conditions would be that I want to get paid in Bitcoin. So I love the fact that I was taking a full year's salary in Bitcoin, but it gave my wife a lot of brain damage.
But you also got to get some of those old stodgy suits out of the closet, and she could put some more dresses in there.
Correct, because I burned all those suits.
I remember that day where I got rid of all my suits from my old consulting days.
Correct, yeah. No,
One of the big perks of the crypto industry.
Yeah. And I'm sure you're the same as me. Like, I will never put another suit on. Like, no one will ever make me wear a suit unless I have to go to a funeral.
I had a Jewish Orthodox wedding recently. I had to find the suit.
Yeah, there's always going to be, I guess, one or two reasons. But yeah, so that, that's it. And I'm here at Klaytn now. Klaytn is Kakao's blockchain. For those who don't know Kakao, it's the largest Web2 platform in Korea. So when we say platform in Asia, super apps are a thing. So a lot of people communicate by chat, and that's what Kakao sort of grew their business on, was a chat application called Kakao Talk. Over 95% of the population of Korea is on it, and Klaytn is their blockchain.
Very cool. Well, I mean, just given your history and how you seem to attach yourselves to really exciting projects that with truly disruptive capabilities, there's a reason you chose Klaytn and Klaytn chose you, right? Like a chat app, it's fun, it's interesting, the adoption rate is incredible. But what's the bigger story here? Like, what do you see happening at Klaytn that gets you pumped?
Yeah, I see a lot of Asia moving towards, first of all, mobile as a platform and away from desktop. And I think having that transition of users who are already pretty tech savvy in Asia, I'm sure you know the average person here is quite active digitally on the internet. So, but having them move and convert from a desktop platform to mobile, it creates a lot more opportunities, especially when it comes to Web3. And so I think what we're excited about is really a lot of these projects who are looking to continue to build infrastructure on Klaytn to create more mobile transactions because 90% of Asia, whether it's Southeast Asia or Northeast Asia, are all on mobile phones. And obviously for Kakao, just to circle back to your question, we know the mobile environment quite well. They are a super app. They're a platform business. It's probably worth noting they were one of the first digital banks in Asia, and now they're the biggest digital bank in Asia. They're actually the biggest bank in Korea at this point. So
wow.
Yeah, it says a lot, and that happened all over. I think they launched in 2017, if I'm not mistaken, or 2016. That happened all within sort of 5 to 6 years.
So as we're thinking about leveraging this incredible community and how it applies to the metaverse and NFTs and in gaming, you don't want to force fit things. You guys want to be methodical, very intentional about looking at these different aspects of the industry, and you have plenty of resources to look at the trends and really think hard about these different areas. What conclusions have you come to about these different aspects of Web3 and where this is going and how Klaytn can support those ecosystem components?
Yes, when we look down our crystal ball, we see a lot more social interactions that will happen on chain. So to be very specific, if you think about our social activity today in Web 2, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, a lot of these will transition in terms of how we interact on chain, and a lot of the data that gets collected on chain will add tremendous value to traditional companies in a sense that they'll have more information on how people transact. The difference between how they transact in a social way in Web 3 versus Web 2 is a lot of the social interactions actually end up with some sort of transaction, financial, economic, or some swap. And so monetizing a lot of that data will become very, very interesting and very important for traditional companies. I think when we get infrastructure and we get more data collection on chain, we're going to see a plethora of traditional companies coming in.
Is that an opt-in experience for the user? I mean, I think there's a lot of criticism of not owning your data. I mean, Brittany Kaiser has been on the show several times and spoke at NFTLA. How do you sort of give brands that opportunity without encroaching on individual sovereignty?
I guess, so data, I agree with that, I like to be kept private. But the data that I'm talking about is more metadata. So it's kind of like, it's not data about you per se, it's data about what you prefer. And I think that's the important differentiation, because I don't really care about whether or not I know 100 people in Web3 and who they are, how old they are. Like, that data is not as important to me. It's more about, is there a pattern of those 100 people in terms of how, like, what marketplace they went to, what type of NFT projects they liked. These types of data points are more sort of higher level meta data points, and I think this is where the monetization becomes quite interesting.
Is that a pathway to figuring out how to activate the metaverse and make it more vibrant? Can data help with that as well?
It can, because I think, where that becomes relevant is the metaverse. If you think about the metaverse, it's going to be a 24/7, 365-day digital economy, essentially.
Right, and I mean, there's places you drive to 12 hours a day in the US and it's desolate. I mean, there's cities that, it's commuter cities, right, where everyone's in the city for a few hours and then leaves. So I guess when you say it that way, there being parts of there's being a vacancy rate within the metaverse at times is not that surprising.
Yeah, it's not. And my belief is in 5 to 10 years, when governments talk about GDP, right, like trying to achieve 5% GDP, what have you, a percentage of that GDP will represent digital activities, right? And it'll be primarily within the metaverse. So I think this is why the Facebooks, the Microsofts, they all have quite a bit of interest in developing one. But more importantly, just to go back to your question, I think this data is important because you can't have people, just activated and providing services 24/7, 365 days on a metaverse. So what becomes important are NPCs, right? NPCs that are...
NPC stands for?
Non-player character. So these are just, non-intelligent sort of drones that are embedded into games at the moment, and they fill some space and some time in the game, right? We see them a lot in open world games, right? Like I play Red Dead all the time, and there's tons of them, tons of NPCs. Now, this data is important because the data will allow, eventually, in my eyes, NPCs to really be able to have more of a structured conversation with people who are coming into the metaverse. So if you think about if, let's say a donut franchise like Dunkin' Donuts had something in the metaverse, they were selling NFTs or they were providing some sort of service, right? You can't have someone at that, let's say, portion of the metaverse operating 24/7. Mm-hmm. You're going to have some sort of NPC interaction. I think all that data that gets collected and processed through NPCs will derive sort of the interaction that will be more interactive than just what we're seeing in games today.
Yeah, I mean, let's continue the conversation to gaming. I'd love to learn more about your perspective on what Klaytn's doing there and how this social graphing, if you will, is applicable.
Yeah, again, if we think about where the social element of the chain is going, right? People are going to want to flex their NFTs. They're already doing that now. People are going to want to talk about different projects. People are going to want to like, dislike, all this stuff.
Yeah.
All that social data needs to get captured on chain. And there's a lot of work being done now. I mean, Lens Protocol, CyberConnect, all these projects are really, they're not working on our chain. They're working on other chains. But at Klaytn, we're looking for projects that are doing similar things to help generate and collect social data. Because again, touching on the data point, I think when we have that kind of infrastructure, we're going to be able to social graph, which is going to be really important because social graphing in Web 2 is very limited. Because whatever you're doing in Facebook, you can't carry that social footprint or graph onto Twitter. And so your social footprint becomes very fragmented. But in Web 3, there won't be any walled gardens. And so your social graph actually starts getting bigger and bigger. And that's the real opportunity because now I can really understand you and your preferences more than I could in Web 2. Because how you behave on Twitter could be very different than how you behave and what you say on, let's say, Instagram. So
you mentioned walled gardens, and immediately it popped in my head is your recent partnership with DeFi Kingdoms, a project I have a lot of respect for. Was this type of long-term thinking what influenced you all partnering with them, or was it more about these guys just have a really cool gaming experience that's just rocking and fun and engaging?
Yeah, you know, that it was a conversation that I had with one of their founders, Dreamer, in New York. We talked about, you know, their ability to access Asia through Klaytn, and that was really the focal point. They've got a great game. Clearly, they know what they're doing. They've got an amazing community.
Yeah.
But they haven't been able to sort of amplify to the next level on Harmony. And so the discussion was really about how can we amplify DeFi Kingdoms in Asia? And that's when we talked about migrating Serendale, their biggest kingdom, over to Klaytn. We have an environment where we really like incubating our projects. And I don't think all layer one blockchains are like that. Most of them will just give you a grant or give you some sort of investment, and away you go.
There's definitely some variability on the level of TLC that's available.
Correct. So we're fond of incubating them, growing them in Asia. We think they'll do quite well. We know the market in Asia. The gamers here are a lot more sophisticated, so they really appreciate good games. But also, you know, it's a big crypto market. People, you know, they love crypto out here at a retail level. So combining those two things, accessing, you know, huge swaths of population that are playing games every day, we thought it was a great fit for them.
Well, great. David, this has been really fun, and I've learned a lot from you and your perspective on where this industry is going. It's so helpful just given where you've come from. If folks want to stay in touch with Klaytn and yourself, what should they do?
You can look us up on Twitter or on Facebook. I think our tag is @KlaytnOfficial. We're also on LinkedIn. You can also find us at www.klaytn.foundation.
That's great. So for our listeners at home that are building interesting projects, definitely take a look at Klaytn and what they're doing. There could be some really interesting synergy there.
Yes, indeed. Thank you.
Thanks.